What do you see as one of the biggest benefits of the cloud, and what is the corresponding tool that you need to get that benefit if
Sure.
you're going to get the most out of that?
Well, I think the biggest benefit is certainly the elasticity of public cloud. That's the biggest benefit. And what comes to me a very, very close second is, and this is, you could argue this is true of any virtualized environment, but it becomes even more so in kind of a hybrid cloud environment. The ability to model your production environment in a test dev environment in a way that isn't super expensive. So I spent 20 years at HP and about 15 years of that in HP IT. I was running HP.com for a long part of that. And with any of our assets that we were running out on HP.com, there was the production environment, and then you got half that for your test environment, you got half that for your development environment. That was kind of the rule of thumb. And this was all on physical hardware, bare metal. And it was because you simply can't afford to have both your test and development environments in a bare metal hardware world be an exact mirror of production, because then you spend 3 times as much on hardware as maybe you think you do. Well, if you're virtualized, and especially if you're using public-private cloud, now you can suddenly, if you have the tools to help you do the modeling, you can model once and run wherever you want to. So you can run, let's say you have some data sensitivity and you want to run your production environment on your private cloud so that your data doesn't get outside your firewall. Well, that doesn't mean you can't take advantage of the elasticity of public cloud to run an exact model of your production environment, but on public cloud, because you're going to run that for a couple hours a week, if not a couple hours a month. So why have the physical hardware underneath the hood of your private cloud required to run those test dev workloads when you certainly don't need them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year? You only need them a couple hours, so you can take advantage of elasticity that way with test dev. There's certainly use cases for like public websites or even commerce sites where you take advantage of the elasticity within an application as load comes to your system. So it's the elasticity and the ability to mimic your production environment in test dev with far more precision, but with far less time, so that you can get better test cycles, but at far less cost.
Right. It's a serious cost-saving measure.
It absolutely is, and you get better quality as a result, because you're not deploying something to production that you couldn't have mimicked in the old days. Maybe you don't have all the load balancers in place in test dev that you do in production, and now all of a sudden something breaks because you didn't have the ability to mimic that in test dev the same way that you could in production. So that elasticity, combined with having the tool sets to help you deploy into those multiple environments in the exact same way. That's where you get the big benefit to what's going on in cloud today.
And Pete, just to add on to that, I totally agree. And I think the one piece you didn't mention, which is even more supporting that, is just kind of time to market, right? Thinking about the speed by which organizations can provision and deploy those resources is exponentially faster now, which supports the ability to really take advantage of those elastic on-demand computing resources. So no
3 month lag time to get your hardware installed, right?
Exactly.
You have it in 10 minutes. You're absolutely right. I missed that one.
Sharon, what's your take on a really important cloud benefit that people need a certain tool to take advantage of? So they're going to really zone in on that.
I think it's the agility and the freedom, right? If I'm listening to Greg and I'm listening to Pete, the agility that you get, the business agility, the operational agility, the financial agility, is the biggest benefit that push people to use cloud resources. Because when you look at the cloud vendors, or at cloud in general, right? Infinite capacity, yes. Self-serve, absolutely. With a portal, you can just get in your credit card and you're up and running for test, development, production. If you're, a tiny startup that just need to launch several servers, you're up and running in a few hours. So it's everything related to agility and freedom to operate. No more 3 months to get, a virtual instance up and running. That's what push companies to the cloud. However, when you think about agility and freedom, you also think about I wouldn't say the resistance, but the way how IT used to operate, used to plan their capacity, used to plan their their future applications that are up and running in the cloud. So you've seen, like 18 or 24 months ago, you've seen the resistance from IT to take critical applications and push them to the cloud. And today, when we talk to our clients, most of our clients are IT people that already embrace cloud and looking for ways to become much more agile in terms of provisioning and support the business growth.
You know, that same phenomenon you talked about, the agility and being able to set up a cloud deployment with a credit card, has spawned this idea of shadow IT, where a certain division in a company just can't get the job done, and so they actually start, they hire their own compute capacity separate from the larger IT department. Some people complain about that. I'm sure certain things have gotten done because of that, which, although it's called shadow IT, it might actually have its own advantages.
Well, but to me, that very much speaks to the idea of IT not sort of changing its mindset, and I completely agree with Sharon that the agility part of that is really, really paramount. That IT is used to being funded by corporate taxes, essentially, right? At the beginning of the year, you figure out how much you think you're going to make in revenue. Some percentage of that, around 2%, is what IT gets funded for. It's a fixed cost throughout the rest of the year. And so it's IT's job to try to spend as little of that money as possible and be as responsible with that money as possible. But that agile development methodologies don't work that way. And if any of you guys happen to be at the GigaOM Structure last year, guys like the CIO of Revlon, like Kohl's. So it's not just Netflix and Airbnbs of the world. I mean, these are big companies that you don't traditionally think of as having big technology components. And while they still do have a cost center component, they've flipped the model the way that it's funded, such that they can control what clouds and what applications people use within the line of business teams within the Revlons and the Kohl's of the world. But they have chargebacks so that IT gets funded through the line of business teams and what project they have going on right now. In the old model, you had this annual funding cycle and you had these annual project suggestions that went on. And you had to, if you're a line of business team owner, you had to predict sometimes as much as 18 months in advance what kind of project or what kind of infrastructure you thought you would need. Whereas now, if you can, as Sharon's pointing out, if you can take advantage of the agile model and change the way that IT gets funded, now all of a sudden you can be an enabler to your line of business teams instead of being that roadblock.
You know, when you talk to clients that works with cloud vendors, you know how public clouds pitch the benefit of a cloud, right? It's the agility. It's the ability of freedom to act, and I would actually challenge the term shadow IT. Maybe shadow IT does not exist anymore. Maybe shadow IT is the real IT of tomorrow or of today, and nothing is going to left inside. So maybe there is no shadow IT anymore.
I'm sure there's some CIOs out there who would probably disagree with that statement, but I like the thought.
Yeah.
Greg, what's your take? A key benefit and a tool that someone needs to take advantage of that benefit?
Sure. So, I guess I would look maybe to where things are moving to. And I think what's interesting in terms of one of the benefits that customers can expect moving forward is this ability to be able to leverage pieces of their application hosted or delivered from different cloud providers. And my view there and what we're seeing emerge here is the reality that if you take a snapshot, let's just call it infrastructure as a service, right? That piece of the cloud market today. If you take a snapshot of the current landscape of infrastructure as a service providers today, I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I would bet that's going to look very different in a year, 3 years, 5 years. And that's what's so exciting about the space, right? Is there's so much innovation and investment being made within the space now. So as an enterprise organization, I'm going to increasingly have the ability to think differently about where I place workloads and about where I deliver my applications from. So that's the benefit, right, is the fact that there's going to be continual innovation here, and there will be, I think, increasingly differentiated services built on top of infrastructure as a service to be industry-specific, use case-specific type offerings. And so the tool there, and I'm not going to plug any one vendor, but kind of to the point that Paul talked about in his opening, I think that the challenge of having this kind of rapidly evolving landscape of cloud services is how do you manage applications across these various hosting platforms. And so I think one of the key tools that folks are going to continue to rely on is looking at cloud management platforms and tools that allow them with a single pane of glass to have visibility into various virtual environments across their organization, both on-premise and in the cloud, and thinking about the ability to quickly provision those resources and deploy applications across those environments, and then thinking about doing things like not only being able to migrate applications across virtual environments, but actually being able to think about having VM interoperability, right? So you can do things like migrate across, a VMware to an OpenStack environment, and have kind of the application stack changes required to operate in those different environments adapt, so VM translation type capabilities. So that kind of generic cloud management platform category of tools, I think is going to be really exciting to watch in terms of how it evolves and allows customers to take advantage of what hopefully is going to be a whole lot of different cloud services brought to market in the years to come.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the idea of the single pane of glass you talked about is also the promise for the software-defined data center. So I think there's kind of this union going on between cloud and software-defined data center. They're going to merge if the promise of that single pane of glass, monitoring panel truly comes true. Paul, a key tool that a company needs if they're going to get some big benefit out of the cloud, what do they really need?
Sure. And, sort of in line with the theme of this discussion that we're having, cloud computing, there are a lot of benefits, and all the panelists have talked about some great benefits. And I think since there are many benefits, it sort of points to this idea that you need an entire toolkit of tools actually to take advantage. So I almost want to step back to that higher level and say, okay, you show up to a cloud service provider, an infrastructure as a service provider, and they're going to give you this nice elastic cloud that gives you resources on demand. You can use them when you need them, and return them when you don't. But to really flesh it out and to really get some of those additional benefits, I think you need a set of different things, this complete toolkit. And that would include things like getting your applications into a cloud and managing them and doing configuration and patch changes. It would also include a category around the area of economics, so making sure that you understand what you're spending, how you're spending it, whether you're doing so efficiently and economically. A third category would be related to the network, making sure that you're connecting your on-premises environment with the public cloud appropriately. Maybe there's a caching solution or performance management or traffic acceleration solution, but it's that whole category of the network. And then I'll just wrap up with a fourth one. It doesn't have to be what I would call a cloud brokerage solution, but I think there's several different areas that are starting to emerge where there's tools or management tools that sort of bring all this together and integrate it and allow you to look at your IT environment more holistically. Look at the applications that you have running on different public clouds as well as applications that you have internally, and have it help you make decisions on which applications to place where, how to make the best economic decisions when you're placing your applications and so on. So I think it really is a toolkit.
Yeah, the cloud broker seems like that's a trend on its way up, and then the idea of the cloud exchange and the companies like Equinix that are sort of the big cloud connectors. It's sort of an interesting trend.